Hello, and welcome to Castle Talk, where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castlebridge Media and author of the new book, The Serpent's Nest, Young Captain Nemo, out now from Macmillan Children's Books. Tonight, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, currently published by Comixology. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Hello, Drew.
That was as fancy as it was when you said that last night on the Castle of Horror regular episode. So you're so polished at that. It makes me swell with pride every time. I think if I were to list off my sense of accomplishments, I just feel like a jackass. But when you do it, for some reason, I'm able to be like, pretty good, Drew, pretty good.
Well, that makes me feel good. I'm glad to hear it. It's funny. It can be really funny trying to share your resume, but you don't want to be the one to share your resume. That's what being on a show is actually great for, because you have the equivalent of that guy. I'm that guy who stands next to the door. I'm a servant, and you're like, you're the Scarlet Pimpernel, and you've just walked into the ballroom, and I go, Baron Percy, a Best Writer Ringo nominee.
Now, I don't know if there's going to be any dealing with me for the rest of this interview, because you've pumped up my ego so much. But I will try. A masked hero at one of the original masked.
Yeah. I actually wonder, was there a prior masked hero before the Scarlet Pimpernel? I'm trying to.
Might be on the money there. It might be the OG of the secret identity genre.
Because Zorro was a ripoff of the Scarlet Pimpernel, for sure.
Yes.
And the Lone Ranger is a ripoff of Zorro. I'll be darned. It'd be difficult aside from the Man in the Iron Mask, it's hard to think of anybody in a mask like that. But somebody could write in and tell us. But somebody should ask Alan Moore. It seems like something he would know. Yes, he would, wouldn't he? In fact, one of the really sweeping League of Extraordinary Gentlemen books probably has this character in it.
It must. Yeah. Like, if not, that was an oversight on his part.
I know we're not here to talk about the Scarlet Pimpernel, but it would be fun. Gosh, maybe we're here to talk about crossovers, particularly a crossover you're working on. I think Scarlet Pimpernel you definitely should do in the future. But right now, so you do Halloween Man, and I'll let you talk about what Halloween Man is. But right now, you're in the middle of an Indiegogo to raise money on a project you're working on, but it's for a good cause. And it is a Halloween Man world crossover with somebody else's world, and it's called the Aerobicide Lucy Chaplin Science Starlet Crossover. Now tell me what that is, starting anywhere that you like.
So the story is subtitled Revenge of the Creeping Dread, which sounds an awful lot like the title of a very famous 80s horror film, and I think most of you, if you think about it for 2 or 3 minutes, you'll be able to work that out.
Right.
But essentially, the idea for this, I've known Terry Parr for going on 20 years. He was a groomsman in my wedding. He was one of the first artists to work on Halloween Man. I love the guy like a brother. He's a big part of my creative history in the comic book industry is attached to this guy. And he's also somewhat of a convention fixture in Texas. Like, if you go to a lot of conventions in Texas, you've probably met Terry. He's just at a ton of them. Wonderful art, very extremely talented artist, father, husband, just good guy. So he has this comic Aerobicide, which is set in the 80s, and it's about an aerobics instructor who is also a ninja warrior. And it's in 1980s Venice Beach, and she's taking on, various 1980s enemies, and it's also very kind of cheesecakey, because that's somewhat of Terry's aesthetic. And
but what I love when I'm looking at it is that aesthetic includes everything you can imagine about, think of like Jamie Lee Curtis in Perfect, the because she played an aerobics instructor.
Yeah.
And, those French cut aerobics outfits with the tights and
leg warmers.
Everything. Yeah. No, a fashion that is completely of a time. There is, you do not, even if you hearken to it, nobody dresses the way that an aerobics instructor dressed in 1985. And it is unbelievable. Yeah, he does he does a great job with this. My gosh.
Yeah. So this character Sherry, Terry was very instrumental in how Lucy looked, and in fact, the new Lucy design, which we brought out a couple of years ago, which I've had a lot of success for, Terry was one of the designers of that. So he's one of the few people that was involved with both iterations of Lucy, like heavily, like what she looks like. So when he started doing Aerobicide, like very early on, I remember being at a convention and he had a cosplayer dressed up as Sherry, and I had my wife Jamie dressed up as Lucy, and a picture was snapped of the two of them together, and we were like, oh, we should totally do this as a book, But then of course there's the question of what is this going to be about? And so, we knew we wanted to do a crossover, but it kind of languished for, about a year. And then this documentary on the movie Return of the Living Dead came out called More Brains. And as fate happened, both him and I were watching it on the same kind of rainy afternoon. And we started texting each other back and forth. And the idea was sort of hit upon to do kind of like a last action hero / Purple Rose of Cairo, even though fuck Woody Allen, that kind of thing. But like our two heroines, instead of them meeting, usually with these crossover things, you have characters meet each other in one character, like what happened with the Halloween Man hack / crossover, where you had hack / characters go to the Halloween Man world. We thought, wouldn't it be more fun if these two characters met in the world of an 80s horror film?
Oh, and love it. Yes.
We're both roughly, we're both guys in our 40s. So that's what we grew up with. So, there's like the nostalgia factor, but it also became fun because Halloween Man is set in an alternate present. It's not quite the world we live in, but it's still 2021. But it's kind of like the 2021 that the people in the 1950s would have thought 2021 would have been more like. Whereas, he's got his sort of weird pop culture version of the 80s. So you have that added level of fun where it's kind of a time travel thing too, where you have a character that's from the past dealing with a character that's from the future. So it was fun, like Terry and I roughed out a story, and then I wrote the script, but we worked on the story together.
And when you do a script, do you do full script, like chapter, like
I do full script,
panel by panel?
Yeah, the whole enchilada. Like I don't I like to be involved. Like I give a lot of room for artists to work, but I like being involved with how things look. So outside of even just doing the script, like I tend to send a lot of like photo reference. I'll direct people to movies, and in particular with this, since we were doing an 80s zombie pastiche, like there was a lot, Brian Crowley, the guy that ultimately ended up being the artist, there was a lot of like, oh, draw this one zombie from Dawn of the Dead, draw the Michael Jackson zombie from Thriller, like let's put this kind of, how many references to other, 80s, zombie films could we get in there, which ended up being considerable. He also, because he's a big Ninja Turtles fan, he also ended up throwing a lot of Ninja Turtles references in there as well. So yeah, so like when it comes out, like you can have a pretty good time like getting out your microscope and like going through this and picking out the reference. But the reason why we ended up doing the Indiegogo and why we're at where we're at is like over the last year, I don't have to tell you, we've been in the middle of a pandemic, and that killed the comic book convention industry, which for a lot of people, like that's a big, when you're working comics, it's a big chunk of your income right there. And look, I'm not trying to say that we should have continued doing in-person conventions. That would have been not responsible, but I'm just trying to paint a picture of like the sort of economic blowback of that. And Terry ended up getting COVID, and he's since recovered. That was months ago, but he because of what has happened, he has taken on a lot of economic loss, and he's now been hit with medical bills that are beyond his ability to pay. And it's not like there is like an insurance umbrella for creatives. Like if you're a freelancer, you could either afford health insurance or not. And like aside from
is
just
that
trying
common?
to draw,
just so I understand, if you're I've been a novelist for as long as I've been alive, but the only way I've ever had health insurance is through jobs, right? Is it common that a comic book artist or creator may not have sufficient health insurance, especially for a catastrophic?
It's not uncommon at all.
Yeah,
I didn't have health insurance for a good chunk, of my 20s.
It's shocking, isn't it? I mean, it's ridiculous. I definitely don't want to get off on this tangent, but it's nuts.
No, this is something I want to use this to bring attention to. Like, this is absolutely a tangent. It's not a tangent. This is the issue. If we lived in a better world, we wouldn't be having to do an Indiegogo. We'd just be able to be making the comic to have fun.
Just to do the book.
Yeah. It wouldn't
so actually, just to connect the dots,
to raise
real
money
quick,
to help out Terry.
You're doing this Indiegogo. In other words, you're doing a book that you were already planning with him, but you're doing the Indiegogo. Somebody else is drawing it, and you're doing this to help Terry, and then presumably you're going to do more work together in the future. But this project that
Terry and I will always work together.
Yeah. So this project you were planning together has become your it's become a different and special project in a sense. So
yes, absolutely. And Terry was originally going to draw it. That was the plan.
Yeah.
But when what happened, like he was able to he's done one of the variant covers, like he's back where he can draw, but like it took him a long time to recover, and that put him out of drawing, for which again also cut into, because like he was making ends meet, selling, like doing drawings over the internet and selling prints and things like that. But there's terrible income inequality in any creative industry. Like we think of, when we think of comic book creators, we tend to think of like the ones that are working for, Marvel and DC, which are like top tier people. And in some cases, making, thousands, if not millions of dollars a year.
Yeah.
But there's a whole class of like, especially indie creators, where it's a lot more blue collar. And, if I can use this to raise awareness for that, great. But, when he got sick, I told his wife, Halo, I was like, look, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put together a team. I know people, we're none of us who worked on it. Like we have to hit our goal for anybody, just to stress how we're doing this. We have to pay Terry's medical bills first. We have to make the perks and produce the book second. Once we have accomplished all of that, if we have hit all of our goal and then some, then and only then will anybody who worked on this book collect a paycheck, because we were all doing it to help Terry. And like that's the sort of community the comic book community is. Like Brian only knows Terry online. He does not have the long history with him. He's a great indie creator in himself. He does Hamster Rage, which is a great webcomic. I've known him for years. He worked for Devil's Due. He worked with me on the Hack Slash crossover. He's a great guy. And like we all understood, what was at stake here and why we were doing this. And the sort of morality behind it. And so he was like, look, I'm gonna draw it. It was basically like, Terry, rest up, get better, we're gonna make this, we're gonna make it the best that we can in the amount of time that we have, and we're gonna put it out there, and we're gonna crowdfund it, and we're gonna raise this money. And I think that's one of the things that's great about the comic book community, is that they'll circle the wagons when you need them to, like we'll take care of our own. Although again, I have to stress, in a better world, we wouldn't have to do this.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about the community comic book creators, because in a sense it's a way, it's the way I've often explained it to people, and I haven't done an independent comic in many years. I haven't written a comic in many years. But the way I explain it, it's like being the producer of a theater, like in Slings and Arrows, like they run a Shakespeare theater and everything. You're putting it all together, and all the other guys who do it, and nobody's getting rich. You're all true artists, making your characters, creating your worlds, sometimes carving out a living, and it's like nothing else. I mean, it's just unique. But the way it really comes alive, besides Comixology, where people just read on their iPads, is in those conventions. And the notion that, you and I have been at a bunch of conferences together over time. And, you go to you get a table and you set up your stuff and you sell. And the notion that there's been this pandemic where everybody is, in their basements. I'm literally in my basement office right now. And if conferences were going on, I'd be out there multiple times a year with a table selling books and meeting people and doing symposiums and stuff. It's just unreal how it just all shriveled up and went away.
Well, and almost overnight. And again, not for nothing. Like I'm not trying to say that there wasn't a good reason for that, but
yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But the economic devastation of that needs to be looked at. And this is a situation that is part of that. And, although it's part of a larger issue because of the way, and look, we can go back to talking about zombies in a second, because I'm sure everybody's like, stop talking about health insurance and start talking about zombies. But, we need to look at how we treat our creative working class.
Yeah.
And there needs to be more of a serious talk about the way the health infrastructure is in this country, because this shouldn't be the way things are. And I think that we're a lot of people that are more acutely aware of that than they were a year ago. But, and I am lucky enough that I have not been as economically affected by COVID as a lot of other people. Yeah. But I definitely know a lot of people who have their business has scraped by, or in some cases gone. And I just, I can't fix all of that. I am such a bleeding heart that I wish I could hold my hands to the sky and fix everything, but I can try my damnedest on this interpersonal level to help Terry. And I'm hoping when people hear the passion in my voice about this, that they'll want to help out too.
I mean, and the great thing is that you actually have something you can do. You have a project that you could immediately turn to. It must be strange this is from the sublime to the ridiculous. It must be strange for Terry to have somebody else drawing his characters. I always wondered what that's like. Since
the only thing that he said very early on is that I would like to, show me the art and I want to make sure that's an artist that I like. And once he saw like the version of Lucy and the version of Sherry, he was pretty much good to go. Although I'm sure it is weird. I don't doubt it. And I think in his perfect world, he probably would draw everything that was Aerobicide. But it also, though, it expands his universe too, because now you have this different take on it through a different
somebody else's
lens.
Vision. And that's a subtle word because it's not a complete re-envisioning, but somebody else's style being brought to a particular character. You said Revenge of the Creeping Dread is
Creeping Dread
is patterned after obviously the Revenge of the Living Dead and Return of the Living Dead. And it's a zombie story. So what kind of zombies have you chosen?
Well, these are very much the zombies of that franchise. Like, they're smart, they're fast, because the zombies in Return of the Living Dead are the scariest zombies, in my opinion, because they're basically unstoppable and they're intelligent and they're invincible. And it's, people are always like, oh, the zombies in 28 Days Later. I was like, have you seen Return of the Living Dead? That's nightmare fuel. Come on. Like,
they're also hilarious. My
yes,
favorite is when the zombie picks up the CB radio and is like, "Send more police," because every police car that comes their way, they're basically destroying and eating the passengers, and then they radio
it's like
for more
Uber
police.
for Uber Eats for zombies.
That's so great.
You know, I you know, we were very careful that things were just removed enough to where we were still doing our own thing, but it's very much an homage to that particular film, but also just that era of horror films, because like 80s horror, I mean, every decade of cinema has its own flavor, but for some reason 80s horror is something that people, it's like iconic of the horror genre. And you know, maybe it's because like so many franchises came out of it and there's so many memorable movies. Excuse me. Well, can you edit that?
Well, there's a real
gross.
sort of rock and roll, like, and I'd say the 80s as far as horror goes. The 80s you're describing that begins like 2 or 3, obviously, just like the 70s, 2 or 3 years in. Because I think if you look at stuff from like 81, well, but I mean, most stuff from very, very early doesn't necessarily fit this. But your mid to late 80s, for sure. Everything has a rock and roll score. Everything has a lot of like you know, new wave fashions and punk fashions.
Well, especially Return of the Living Dead. Like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
And I think you if you wanted to do a double feature of movies that typify the sort of rock and roll horror genre of the 80s, like I think it would be Return of the Living Dead and The Lost Boys, because I think those movies have so much to answer for as far as like creating this particular breed of monster that also has to be a rock star.
Yes. And there's a style to it all. Like, if I think of, to me, there are two things about The Lost Boys that are kind of really at odds, by the way, because there's this super slick, like, you know, really cable TV kind of, there are the vampires themselves who are smooth and wearing nice clothes, moving in slow motion. And then you've got the vampires fighting the vampire killers section where it's jokey and there's rock music playing and you know, the Corys are wearing kerchiefs around their foreheads and all that stuff, bandanas and all that stuff. That's a really odd movie, but I don't know where to go with that. What
Well, I just like when like that was the sort of vibe that we were trying. I mean, obviously you don't have a soundtrack in a comic book, but we wanted something that you could put on like 80s music, you know, like hair metal or punk rock or new wave or something in the background, and like 45 Grave or something. And you know, it would be the perfect soundtrack to read this comic to. And we even did because 80s horror is known for like nudity and everything. We even have like an R-rated. We have a PG-13 version, which is what's going to go up on Comixology. And
no, really,
one that you can get off. There's an R-rated version that has. I have to stress, neither one of our leading ladies are naked. There's not that. You don't get Lucy boobs in this. I'm sorry. There's going to be a lot of pervy people that are going to be disappointed by that. But there is nudity and cussing in this version that is not in the other one. And that was simply, we were like, well, we should do that because that was Brian's idea, but it was a good idea because like that's what 80s horror was like, you know, like it was kind of transgressive.
When I think of the gratuitous nudity in Return of the Living Dead, it is actually, the funny thing is the gratuitous nudity in Return of the Living Dead has become legendary. I mean, people still talk about that when they talk about that movie more than most. Yes, and actually now I can't remember the name of the actress, but people go, oh yeah,
Leanna Quigley.
Yeah, there you go.
And she's a naked punk rocker, and then she's a naked zombie. And God,
no, but that's seriously, you're having an R-rated version kind of totally makes sense. If
well, it's not something I would normally do, you know, because first of all, because like of the having to work within the rating system of Comixology, but like in this time, it really fit. And I like so Brian brought it up, and I was like, yeah, let's do that, you know. And like, so he God bless him, he drew every panel with this one character in twice, because in, you know, one panel she was naked, and in another panel she was fully clothed. And you know, I just hope his wife was understanding when he was late at night drawing a naked zombie.
Right. Well, I'm sure that she was. I have no doubt. You know, the funny thing is, Terry actually draws a lot more cheesecake than you would expect, and but it's really fun. Like, he's got all this like Vampirella kind of cheesecake drawings and everything.
Kind of what he's known for. Like, he's ever since that's sort of how we met. He was at a convention when I was very early on doing Halloween Man. Terry was doing an independent book called Rocket Rangers, which is kind of a Flash Gordon pastiche.
Yeah.
And it had this very kind of Dave Stevens-esque art style to it. And, you know, we started talking, and, you know, through that conversation, of course, we come to find out that we're both really big fans of The Rocketeer. And, you know, that's was enough for a creative partnership goes. But yeah, Terry draws amazing women, and the way he draws them, I think, you know, it's ways that women, you know, it's inclusive, you know, like I know a lot of women that really like his artwork, and I think it's because he has an extreme detail for clothing. Like, if you look at like the way, this is gonna sound so strange, but if you look at the way, like, if he has a character that has hosiery on, like, the details, like from the seam up the back and everything, like it's so detailed. Or a shoe, like if he designs a shoe, like that shoe, and go, oh, I want to own that shoe, because like he makes clothes that looks great.
And there's a real skill to this, because it both looks very realistic, you know, so that you can like suggest buttons and seams and all that stuff, and yet it also has a cartoonish style that is all his own. I also wanted to mention, looking through his Instagram, he has this, I think, one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen, where he took like an old this was a commission, but he took an old like 1950s, you know, romance comic, where oh no, it was a Supergirl comic. It was like a 50s or 60s Supergirl comic, where she's sad because somebody she's in love with is with somebody else, and he switched it up so it's Wolverine in the pose of Supergirl with his broken heart because Jean Grey is with Scott Summers, and it's so wonderful, because it flips all your expectations of superhero comics and romance comics on their heads, and gender norms and all that stuff. And that is nothing gives me a picture of who Terry is more than this image of a sobbing Wolverine from a fake romance cover. That is brilliant.
I think he would love hearing that. So there was Terry is a very soft-spoken, humble guy. The thing is, like, if you were to meet him, you know, he's very introspective, and, you know, like he's kind of the opposite of me, because, you know, like when I'm at conventions, I am a talker. Like, I will talk your ear off. Terry is the opposite of that, but like he's what I think what a lot of people like see in his artwork is exactly what you're talking, is that there's a cheekiness about him that comes out through his artwork. And it's one of the reasons why I think that I have, you know, stayed in touch with, like, as recently as like a year or so ago, I had him do a cover for me where there's a villain in Halloween Man called Robo Satan, and it's like literally like a giant mech that's like a demon mech. And I was like, oh, I want Lucy on, because the issue had like a big fight between Lucy and this character, Robo Satan. And I was like, well, I want something that's kind of like a kind of cheeky, but also kind of kinky, of like her like sitting on top of this robot, like she's made this robot submit to her. And like he absolutely like got it, like, you know, like, because like the wrong person could have taken that image and turned it into something like really crass and gross, Whereas like the way he did it, it has all that sort of, dominant submission stuff in it that I wanted it, but he did it in such a way that it's cute and, it feels fun. Which I think anytime you are trying to incorporate kink into a comic, you need somebody that has a sense of humor about it, because otherwise, I mean, there's so much gross stuff out there, and you don't want to be that. And so Terry, like, he's a smart artist. Like, he really thinks about every, image that he puts in, like there's just like maximum effort on everything. And, honestly, like if the industry was like a little bit different, like this is a guy that should have been doing Catwoman years ago, something like he would be perfect for that. Like,
oh, absolutely.
And it's just a tough industry, and like not everybody gets to that point. But like, just I think my favorite story about another artist, and I'm not going to name who the other artist, but they're fairly famous comic book artists. I was at a convention and Terry was a table over to me, and then he got up to go to the bathroom, and this guy that I knew who was a DC artist at the time, he came by and he starts flipping through Terry's sketchbook, and he looks over to me, and I'm like, hey, how's it going, man? He's like, oh, this is Terry stuff. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I would just love to crush his hands with a rock because he's just so much better than I am. And I was just like, that's a compliment, but it's also a threat.
It's also pretty weird. It's a very strange thing to say. But I know where he's coming from. I mean, absolutely.
Hey kids, comics.
That's really funny. Wow. Isn't it funny, by the way, at a convention, how you have to, the reason why at the end of the day you're so exhausted is, you want to talk to people, you want to chat people up, you want to sell work, you want to meet friends, and it is just exhausting. You're just on all day long. I miss it. I do.
I miss it too. I miss it a lot. But like, I think the thing about conventions is like, I feel like, I do one of those and then I have to take an entire day where I just sequester myself, sometimes two, where I just sequester myself off and don't talk after doing one. Like, I just like my voice is shot, and I just like the one I always think about is like Anime Fest, because like there's always Monday where you were they're only open for like a couple of hours before you have to pack up. And like I do the whole gauntlet. I do the whole thing. So I'm like there right up until it's over, and like I'm just shot by the end of it. And it's
going to take some time. The funny thing is, people are going to have to get back, and it's going to take some time for them to get back into the swing. I have no doubt. But
I think New York Comic Con sent out their thing, like asking people to submit for Artist Alley, and they're acting like they're going to go through with it. And I am debating applying for a table.
When is this?
But this is in October. But I'm wondering if people will still be gun shy about going to a convention at that point, because I think, I still think people, and look, I want to get back out there, and I know a lot of other people that do, but like I just think that people are still very guarded, and rightfully so. I mean, until more people are vaccinated, I think that's where kind of we need to be. But boy,
it's a really good question. It really is.
And there's no right answer. Like this is it's just going to take time. And thankfully, because sorry,
no, go ahead.
So thankfully, because of the internet, like we're all able to keep ourselves busy in other ways.
No, yeah. I mean, I've had like 3 books come out during the pandemic, and that were all planned before, but it's been a super strange time to do all of this stuff. So back to the project real quick. Tell me about your goal, and tell me about when you need to meet your goal and when you intend to get this stuff done. Because I don't really understand how an Indiegogo works. Like, I know when you're doing an actual comic, if something is going to come out at Christmas, then you need to get it turned in like 2 months early, which means you need to, there's all this. How does it work with this?
So with this Indiegogo, we have an overall goal of 6,500. We are, as of right now, at $1,587. We have 46 days left to make the rest of that. If we're doing this mathematically to keep on task at the time of this recording, I need to, by the end of today, I need to be at least 1,600, and I need to roughly hit about $100 a day. I'm not going to do that. Like, that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is it's going to come in waves, because crowdfunds, like the enthusiasm is in ebbs and flows.
So by now you kind of know how crowdfunding works. That's interesting to me.
Yes. The first time I did a crowdfund, I was completely, like, it wrecked my nerves. But honestly, the only thing, like, the main thing with me is making people understand why we are doing this, and, you know, the mathematics of why it's important for us to hit those goals. Because, like, we're needing to get over the amount, and I'm not going to say specifically, but we need to get over the amount of what Terry has on his bills, and get into the point where we're not only have enough to make his bills, but also pay for the production of this book.
Yeah.
And as far as, like, a deadline goes, we're working on the book. The book is close to being done. It's in the lettering stage. But we're not even going to submit it to Comixology until the crowdfund's done. Like the last time I did a crowdfund, I submitted the book early, and it ended up coming out. Like, Comixology bumped it up, and it ended up coming out during the crowdfund, and I think that killed some of the enthusiasm, so I'm not doing that. I want everybody to get their books, whether digitally or in print. I want them to get it roughly around the same time. So, like, the actual book will probably come out, like, in the summer, for the general public. But I think that this is, like, look, outside of the fact that we are doing this for the noblest, most selfless of reasons, this is a fun comic book. Like, I'm hoping that like this is a comic book you would enjoy reading, even if it wasn't, there wasn't all this other stuff that I've talked about tonight.
Exactly.
Attached to it. Like, if you like horror movies, and you like particularly 80s horror movies, you're gonna get a kick out of this. It's your kind of thing.
Good. Awesome. And I know a lot of people are. I mean, a lot of people that really resonates with people. So by the way, if you look at these character designs, I love the design of Lucy, and I love the design of Aerobicide. Is that her name, Aerobicide, or is
her name is Sherry Ken?
Sherry Ken?
Yeah,
cool.
Like Shuriken. Like a throwing star.
Yeah, which is why she carries the katanas and all that stuff, but wears 80. It's such a neat vision. So to have these characters together is really beautiful. Wow. Well, that's fantastic, Drew. Okay, well, while I've got you here, I should ask you what else you're working on. I mean, because I know that you've always got something up your sleeve.
Oh man, I am working on. There's a lot of projects that got pushed back because of COVID. I am working on stuff that's going to come out this year. The Bella character from Halloween Man is going to get her own 2-part comic book. That's getting whittled away at bit by bit, and that's going to come out later in the year. There is a bunch of Halloween Man stuff that is coming out. In particular, one that there's two in particular. There's a story arc in the actual Halloween Man comic called Entropy that it's one that we've been building towards through for basically the last year of Halloween Man ongoing, and I'm interested to see. It's the very first kind of cosmic Halloween Man story. Like, we've stayed away from that sort of Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer kind of stuff, but I wanted to delve into that. But there is, on a smaller scale, one of my goals with the Halloween Man book is to have our take on every different classic monster eventually. And I've knocked off a few, but there's 2 books that are coming out this year. There is a book called Halloween Man, The Broken Man, which is essentially Halloween Man versus Mr. Hyde. And then there's Halloween Man Cryptid Chaos, which is our Bigfoot and everything else cryptozoology book. So like there's a lot of stuff. Like the Lucy thing, the Aerobicide thing, that's kind of what I'm rolling out first. But I kept busy during the pandemic, and I have a lot of projects that are now close to fruition. And there's also going to be more Lucy stuff. I'm working on another Lucy book that should be out eventually. I don't want to talk too much about that yet, but I will say I'm working with Kate Zellers on that, and she's an extremely talented artist, and so I think people are going to think that is a beautiful freaking comic book when it comes out.
Wonderful.
But yeah, like tons of stuff.
Yeah,
and of course, I'm always a part of the Castle of Horror podcast.
Yeah, no, I know you and I have been doing. You've been a part of my life for. I sound like Ripley talking to the alien. You've been a part of my life longer than I can remember. Yeah, we record typically every Sunday, and have for about 10 years. And
I actually just said to my wife last night that if we stopped doing the podcast, we probably would just come up with another excuse to go, oh, I just watched this movie, and start reviewing movies together, just like on autopilot.
Oh my gosh, that just reminds me. I'm going to write something down right now because I forgot, but it's an idea. So, okay. All right, cool. Thank you. Yeah, you've inspired me.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. All right. Well, Drew, thank you so much. We will make sure and put the Indiegogo link for, but buzzwords people should look for is Aerobicide, Lucy Chaplin. If you search that, you will probably wind up at the Indiegogo.
It comes right up, like on Google. So
yeah. And your Twitter is I think Halloween Mancom, right?
Halloween Mancom, and I'm posting about this nonstop, among other things, other random musings about pop culture. Lately, I have been rambling on a lot about Superman because I've been rewatching Superman the animated series. So,
all I do is ramble. So it's somebody said to me the other day about my Twitter and my Instagram. It's like your Twitter and Instagram is so on brand that because she's always like, oh, who is this person who's posting a picture of the Love Boat? Well, that's Jason. Yes, it's like 100% nostalgia, slightly monstery. That's pretty much it.
Slightly monstery, 100% nostalgia. I like that.
All right, have a fantastic evening, and I'm really glad that you're able to drop by. I'll talk to you soon. I lost you. What'd you say?
I said thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. I'll talk to you later.